Just a small point of clarification. I'm not actually from Washington. Jeff Eidsness is in the back of the room. He's the Wolf-PAC organizer here in Washington. And anyway, just in case you wanted to talk to a local organizer, he's the man. He's in the back. So I'm from Sacramento. I'm a lawyer, semi-retired lawyer, and a Wolf-PAC volunteer. And I'm here to propose a different tactic. We're all on the same page. You know, got to have that 28th Amendment. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's the only way to go. So I just want to give you a different tactic, a different point of view about how to get it done. Congress has a 9% approval rating. As you know, sometimes some polls show less. That's less approval than the King of England at the time of the Revolutionary War. All right? Now, there are some polls that show that up to 97% of Americans say that gridlock and inaction in government is a #1 problem. There's another poll that shows that 91% of Americans think there's nothing we can do about it, but there is. Obviously, we got to restore our democracy. We need more democracy and not less of it. Restore free and fair elections, and I need to define that. By free, I mean they've got to be free of the corrupting influence of big money. Politicians can't just be bought, but unfortunately it's possible to buy them, and we're seeing it. By fair, I mean that any citizen can run for office. You shouldn't have to be a millionaire or billionaire, which is what half of our Congress is made up of now, thanks to the Supreme Court, and you shouldn't have to have access to millions of dollars to run for Congress. But thanks to the Supreme Court, that's exactly the situation we're in. Look, the Supreme Court started interfering with campaign finance in a big way, actually back in 1976 in Buckley versus Vallejo. And in 1976, in inflation-adjusted dollars, in today's dollars, it cost about $150,000 to get elected to Congress. So an honest person could raise that kind of money over a 2-year period in honest ways. But by 2012, it cost $1.7 million on average to get elected to Congress, just because of the Supreme Court. And it's only going up faster because of McCutcheon. So the problem is the US Supreme Court decisions that have corrupted our system. Nobody except the Supreme Court ever voted to allow that kind of thing in our government. It's just those 5 men on the Supreme Court. And as it's been pointed out, speech has its own constitutional rights. Corporations and billionaires have the right to give unlimited money. I can't say it better than Mark did, that yeah, I have a right to give that kind of money too, but unfortunately, I'm not going to, because it's not possible. The only way to overrule the Supreme Court is with the amendment. No two ways about it. We've got to overrule Citizens United and the related cases, and we've got to do it clearly, unequivocally. And there are 2 ways to amend. The first way is through Congress. Congress can write the amendment. But expecting Congress to fix Congress is like expecting cancer to cure cancer. It's not going to happen. And secondly, if Congress, and just keep in mind, I'm just giving you a different tactic here. We all want the amendment. Okay, if Congress writes this amendment, it's going to be Swiss cheese. There are going to be loopholes big enough in this thing to fly a jumbo jet through. And I can bet you that jumbo jet's going to be full of money headed for Washington. So having Congress write it is, answer that for yourselves. Okay, but there's hope. All right, there's hope, because there's a second way to amend. At the 1787 convention in Philadelphia, General George Mason rose when they were discussing Article 5 and the amendment process. He got up and he said, well, what are we going to do when Congress is the problem that needs fixing? What are we going to do? And fortunately, there was an answer. After a lot of discussion by a lot of smart people, they came up with a second way. It's through the states. The states have a co-equal opportunity to amend the Constitution. And the way that they do that is through an amendment that's written by a convention. And the convention is called by the states. Sometimes it's called an amendments convention. It bypasses Congress. And the way it works, there are 3 steps. First, 2/3 of the state legislatures pass a resolution. It's really a plain vanilla looking resolution. It just says, this state calls on Congress to call a convention to write an amendment to overturn Citizens United. That's step 1. Step 2, the convention is held. And the convention consists of people all over the country. They sit down and they hammer out an effective amendment. Step 3, just like any other constitutional amendment, it doesn't take effect until 3/4 of the states ratify it. That's 38 states. It's a huge hurdle. And so it's going to have to be a broadly popular amendment to get through. But overturning Citizens United has that kind of popular support. The states are going to own this convention. The states are going to control it. Congress has nothing to say about it. They're going to control the subject matter. I'll explain that in a second. They're going to control the delegate selection. And as Alexander Hamilton pointed out in Federalist Paper 85, once 2/3 of the states have called this convention, Congress has to put the convention together and then get out of the way. Get out of the way. Congress has no further discretion. This is the state's party, the People's Party. Let me talk about that 3rd step, the 3/4 ratification. And that's a high hurdle. That's a high hurdle. That means 38 states. Another way to put that is that any 13 states can block it. And to put a finer point on that, any chamber of the legislature in any 13 states can block it. So this thing's going to have to be massively popular. But we all know how popular overturning Citizens United is. So we've got the one amendment that can actually get through that, can actually jump over that hurdle. Here's some good news. And I can say this from experience because I've been doing this in California. I've been going down to the Capitol building and talking to the legislatures and their staffs. They listen to us. They will in Washington, they will in California, all over the country. They're closer to the people. Democracy lives at the state level, even though it's gone in Washington. Now, a question that comes up all the time is, why do I think that the convention would stick to the subject matter that is given? There are several reasons. The first is, as I say, the states control the convention. And if a slate of delegates from a state gets out of control and starts talking about something off topic, the states can call them back in. They can sanction that and prevent it from happening. Another thing is that the convention only exists when 2/3 of the states have called the convention on the same subject, on the very same subject. In the course of our history, states about 733 times by one count have called for this convention on one subject or another. It might be a federal balanced budget amendment. It might have something to do with, increasing states' rights. Might be Citizens United. But 733 times the legislatures have called this convention and it's never been held. The reason it's never been held, even though it only takes 34 states to call it, is that all 34 calls have to be on the same subject. In other words, you can't combine unrelated calls. You can't take 20 calls on topic A and 10 calls on topic B and 4 on topic C and say that you've got 34. You don't. You've only got 34 when it's on the same topic. And so once the convention gets together, it's got to stick to that one topic. It can only propose an amendment on the subject that the states called for. Okay, and I'm going to be just giving a couple of examples, some of which you've already heard already, but throughout our history, we've got a long history of reformers expanding the rights of ordinary people. Been pointed out, at one time only men had the right to vote because men knew best, father knew best, right? Nonsense, said the American people. It took a long time, a lot of struggle to get there, but eventually the fairness in the American people said nonsense to that. People scoffed at the suffragists. How are you going to get the right to vote when you don't have the right to vote? It's through perseverance. It's through appealing to the fairness of the American people. The founders looked at the divine right of kings, this idea in Europe and some other parts of the world that the power to rule, the right to govern, came from God to a particular family and then got passed on through the bloodlines of that family. Nonsense. said the American people. At one point, the Supreme Court said that African Americans were property and could be reclaimed, as has been pointed out. Nonsense, said the American people. The American people were even willing to fight a war over that. American people are fair people. They're strong people. We're not going to put up with this new Goliath that we've got. We've got this new Goliath of great wealth in our country. And let me tell you something about John Roberts. This hasn't been reported in the press. I don't know if you know it or not. But in the McCutcheon decision, which Roberts wrote, John Roberts says this. He admits that big money in politics buys influence. He admits that it buys access. And then he says, there's nothing wrong with that. He said it. It's in the majority opinion. He says that the fact that wealthy people are going to have more influence and access over politicians doesn't make the politicians corrupt. And then he says, and that's not even going to bother the electorate. It's not going to bother the people. People aren't going to mind that. I think he really believes that. I think he really believes that. So, getting the Supreme Court to overrule themselves isn't going to happen. We've got to defeat this wealthy Goliath. In the course of our history, the Constitution's been amended 27 times. It's about once every generation. It's our turn to do it. We've got to do it on our own behalf and our children's behalf and their children's behalf. It's time to get this done. Now, doing it through Congress, look, just in the last year or so, there's this Disclose Act that's pending in Congress. All that's doing is saying, where's the money coming from? Tell us where the money comes from. Congress can't even pass the Disclose Act. And that's not even cutting off the money supply. It's just telling us where it's coming from. It's just telling us whether it's coming from a foreign country that wants to take our jobs. Congress won't even do that. So let's think about this approach. Let's think about going through the states and calling this convention of people from around the country. And let's work together. Let's do it the best way. In my opinion, the Article 5 convention is the best way. So it's time to remove unlimited private money from our public elections. It's time to stop our elections from being auctions and turning them back into elections. And thank you. Thanks. And I just want to ask the fine organizations that are represented here to join us. Join us. And what I mean is the effort of going through the states, the state legislatures that are paying attention to us. And let's get an amendment that really works. Thank you.